When my wife walked out the front door for the last time, our daughter asleep upstairs, and the dinner table still set from the meal we never finished, I sat in silence for what felt like hours. Her packed suitcase was gone. Her toothbrush was missing. The spare key we kept on the hook, still there. But she was gone. I wasn't shocked. Not really. We'd been unraveling quietly for over a year. The arguments had softened into apathy. Her "I love you" had stopped landing. And still, when it happened, it felt like someone had taken a crowbar to my ribs and pried me open. My name's Scott. I'm 34. Divorced now, obviously. Father to an amazing little girl named Chloe. She's 7. She loves dinosaurs and hates cucumbers. And she's the only reason I kept getting out of bed those first few weeks. It's been a year since the split, but this story isn't about my ex. It's about my family. Or at least, the people I used to call that. I grew up thinking family meant safety. My parents, Ken and Marla, raised me and my younger brother, Brian, in a modest house in the suburbs. Dad worked in insurance. Mom was a dental hygienist, and they were the kind of couple who made chore wheels and packed us matching lunches. Not exactly warm and fuzzy people, but reliable. Fair. Or so I thought. Brian's always been the golden child. That's not bitterness. It's just the truth. He was louder, more charismatic, and better at deflecting blame. If I got a B+, they asked what happened. If Brian got a C-, they blamed the teacher. He could crash the family car, and they'd call it a learning experience. I could breathe wrong and be grounded for a week. Over time, I learned to keep my head down. Be responsible. Quiet. Do the work and don't expect praise. Brian, meanwhile, floated through life on a cloud of second chances. When I met Lily, my ex, things started to shift. My parents liked her. She was polite, pretty, said all the right things at Thanksgiving. I thought maybe this was my turn to be seen. We got married 4 years after meeting. Small ceremony, but beautiful. I planned most of it, handled the vendors, paid for most of it too. I didn't mind. I was proud. I wanted to build something solid. But marriage wasn't what I expected. Between Lily's growing restlessness, my long hours at the tech firm, and the general exhaustion of new parenthood, things cracked. Then shattered. She left one night after Chloe fell asleep, saying she couldn't do this anymore. I watched her drive away, the taillights disappearing into the dark. I waited a couple days before telling my parents. I called Mom first. "Hey," I said, "I've got some news. Lily's gone. She left a few days ago." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Oh, Scott, what did you do?" "No, are you okay?" "No, how's Chloe handling it?" "Just immediate blame." "I didn't do anything," I replied, trying not to let my voice crack. Things weren't working. We both. But she cut me off. "You must have done something. Women don't just leave happy marriages. Did you neglect her? Were you distant?" I felt my stomach knot. "Can you not assume this is my fault?" "I'm just being realistic," she said, her voice clipped. "It's better to own your part than play the victim." I didn't respond. I just said goodbye and hung up. That night, I scrolled through our family group chat. Me, my parents, Brian, and a couple cousins. No one had said anything yet, until Brian chimed in. Guess she finally came to her senses. 3 laughing emojis followed. Then Mom reacted with another laughing emoji. Dad sent a thumbs up. My aunt dropped a gif of someone slow clapping. I stared at the screen, stunned. Not one person reached out to me privately. Not one checked on Chloe. I didn't reply. I just turned off notifications and sat in the dark, wondering how these were the people I once trusted with my life. That was the first crack in the dam. The moment I realized I was on my own. But at the time, I still held out some hope. Maybe it was just a bad reaction. Maybe they didn't realize how much I was hurting. Maybe they'd come around. They didn't. The months dragged on. Chloe adjusted faster than I did. Kids are resilient like that. I got her a kitten. We started doing pancake Sundays and movie nights. I learned to braid her hair, badly. She learned to ask before using all the hot water. We were figuring it out, just the 2 of us. My family stayed distant. Occasionally, Mom would send an article about co-parenting tips or how to rebuild after infidelity, even though there was no cheating involved. Brian made a few more jokes in the group chat. At Easter, they invited me, but not Chloe, said it would be too awkward for the extended family. I declined. Then, 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I got the invite. It was a text from Brian. "Hey bro, getting engaged. Big dinner next month. Same spot as your wedding LOL. You in?" Same spot. I blinked. Was he serious? I checked the message again. He had attached a flyer, digitally made, of course. Brian's fiancée, Melissa, smiling next to him, both in matching white outfits like it was a wedding shoot. At the bottom, the details, same hall we used. Same catering company. Same photographer. Even the same playlist. I stared at it in disbelief. He was literally recycling my wedding. Then something ticked in the back of my mind. I remembered the contracts. When I had planned my wedding, I'd booked everything under my name. Every vendor. Every deposit. And in my post-divorce fog, I had never officially closed the accounts. They were still active. Still mine. I RSVP'd yes. And that night, I pulled out my old wedding binder from the storage closet. That's when the plan began to form. A quiet, calculated plan that didn't involve yelling or confrontation. Just redirection. A little reminder of who, exactly, they had dismissed. I showed up to the family dinner exactly 7 minutes late. Not on purpose, it just worked out that way. Chloe was with her mom that weekend, which always left me floating around the house like a ghost. The invite had come from my dad in the family group chat. Dinner at our Sunday. 6 p.m. Bring dessert. No, hope you can make it. No, how have you been? Just a command with a timestamp. I'd ignored the last few gatherings, so maybe this was their way of reminding me I was still supposed to play my part. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, the familiar ache settled in my chest. Their house hadn't changed. Same chipped brick steps, same porch swing that hadn't been touched in years, same porch light that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to work or not. Everything was the same, but I wasn't. When I walked in, no one looked up. Shoes off. My mom barked from the kitchen, not even turning her head. She was pouring dressing onto a salad like it was a performance. Don't track anything in. Brian was already at the table, sitting next to Melissa, his soon-to-be wife, apparently. She was flipping through her phone, showing something to my cousin Dana, who laughed a little too loudly. My dad was uncorking a bottle of wine. Someone had brought a cheesecake. It smelled like roast chicken and garlic bread. I stood in the hallway for a moment, holding the dessert I brought, store-bought brownies, but I'd stacked them in a container to look homemade. No one offered to take it. I set it on the counter. Hey, I said finally. Nice to see everyone. Brian looked up, smirked. Look who's still alive. Melissa giggled. Mom sighed like she'd just heard a car alarm in the distance. Dad nodded vaguely in my direction and poured himself a glass. I sat down at the far end of the table, the only open seat left. No plate. No napkin. I reached over to the sideboard and grabbed one for myself. Dinner was the usual chaos. Brian talked over everyone. Melissa kept dropping hints about ring sizes and flower arrangements. Dana chimed in with stories from her law office, none of which seemed real. No one asked me a single question. Not about work. Not about Chloe. Nothing. I tried to contribute. Mentioned that Chloe had lost her first tooth last week and wrote the tooth fairy a note asking for $5 and a sticker. That's cute, Mom said, buttering a roll without looking at me. Lily always did have a great sense of imagination. I blinked. It was Chloe's idea, right? She replied, unconvinced. Brian jumped in. Bet Lily's glad she got out when she did. Probably sipping mojitos somewhere, living her best life. Dad chuckled. Melissa sipped her wine. Someone muttered, facts. I didn't respond. I just kept chewing my food, even though it tasted like nothing. I could feel my hands gripping the edge of the table, white-knuckled. This wasn't just passive neglect anymore. This was sport. After dinner, I tried to help clear the dishes. My mom swatted my hand away. We've got it. Go keep the boys company. So I walked back into the living room where Brian and my dad were watching sports highlights. I don't even remember what game it was. I sat down at the edge of the couch and pulled out my phone. That's when Brian leaned over. Hey, Scott, he said, not looking away from the TV. Quick question. Yeah. You still got that photographer from your wedding on retainer? My stomach turned. What? The guy, Mark? Max. Whatever. The one who did those slow-motion shots. Melissa loved those. Think we could get him for our engagement night? I stared at him. Did you already book him? He smiled. We might have reused your contact sheet. I turned to Dad. Did you know about this? Dad shrugged. Why reinvent the wheel? Your vendors were solid. I gave Brian the files off your wedding USB. My mouth fell open. That's not. Those were mine. Brian raised his eyebrows. Oh, come on. You're not using them. You're divorced, not dead. I stood up slowly. Did you at least ask? No need, Mom said, walking in and drying her hands. It's family. No, it's not, I said. You didn't ask. You just helped yourselves. Mom rolled her eyes. You really want to be difficult about this? I'm not being difficult, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I paid for those vendors. They're under my name. They're still active because I never closed out the contracts. You can't just... Well, Brian interrupted. You should have closed them. That's not on us. And there it was. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not cracked. Broke. Not just because they used my wedding plans like some discount template, not just because they joked about my failed marriage like it was a meme, but because they genuinely believed they were entitled to everything I had built. They didn't see me as a person. I was a resource, a tool, a footnote in their story. I left without saying goodbye. As I walked to my car, the cold air hit me in the face like a slap. My breath came out in clouds, my hands trembling as I dug for my keys. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the wheel. My heart was pounding, not from anger, but from clarity. They were never going to respect me. Not as a father, not as a brother, not as a son. And I had let them do this. Again and again. For years. I turned the engine, drove home, and sat in the silence of my living room. Chloe's drawings were pinned to the fridge. Her stuffed triceratops sat on the couch, missing one eye. There was an open bottle of juice on the counter, a coloring book half filled on the table. This was real. This was mine. And they would never touch it again. I opened my laptop and pulled up my wedding files. The contracts were all still under my name. Venue, caterer, photographer, DJ. Every single one. Brian hadn't even tried to change them. He'd just assumed. Just like he always did. I looked at the dates. Their engagement dinner was in 10 days. I stared at the calendar. Then I smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a revenge smile. Just a calm one. I closed my laptop and leaned back in the chair, my hands behind my head. Let them send their invites. Let them dress up. Let them show up. Because when they do, there will be nothing there. But I'm not there yet. First, I had to watch the house of cards tilt a little further. And it did. 3 days later, I got a text from Brian. You're still coming, right? We're counting you for the head count. Also, we told the venue your name, so they'll let you in early. Melissa wants you to check on the lighting for the backdrop. You remember how you did it last time. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my phone, called the venue manager, and asked a simple question. Is the engagement dinner under my name? There was a pause. Then she said, Yes, Mr. Kessler. You're the primary contact and card holder. What? I smiled again. Not cruel. Just tired. Just checking, I said. We'll be in touch. And that's when the countdown began. But before I could flip the switch, I had one more visit to make. To someone who'd been silent through all of this. And when I knocked on her door, holding a plastic bag full of coloring books and Chloe's favorite dinosaur stickers, she opened it with wide eyes. Daddy. Hey, kiddo, I said, kneeling down. You want to have a sleepover this weekend? She nodded. And behind her, Lily stood with crossed arms, confused. What's going on? I stood up and met her eyes. We need to talk. Lily and I hadn't really talked, since the divorce was finalized. Our communication had been filtered through short, logistical texts about Chloe, school events, pediatric appointments, clothing sizes. Polite, measured, emotionally sterile. So when I showed up at her door that afternoon, holding a grocery bag with Chloe's favorite dinosaur stickers and a new pair of fuzzy socks, I didn't expect the look of concern that washed over her face. Scott, she said, stepping aside to let me in. What's going on? Chloe beamed and ran past her into the living room. Mom, Daddy brought T-Rex glitter stickers. Lily arched an eyebrow. You're spoiling her. I gave a tired smile. Maybe. We stood in the hallway for a second, the kind of silence that feels heavier because of everything unsaid. Then she motioned toward the kitchen. Want coffee? I nodded, and we sat across from each other at the kitchen island, the sound of Chloe's giggles in the background filling the space between us. I need to tell you something, I said. About my family. Her face tightened slightly. What about them? I recounted the dinner, the engagement plans, the reused vendors. The group chat jokes. The way they'd hijacked our wedding like it was a community template. Her jaw clenched tighter with every detail, her knuckles whitening around the coffee mug. You're kidding, she said finally. I wish. She looked down, quiet for a beat. I always knew your parents were tough. But this? She exhaled, sharp and short. You know they never really liked me, right? I blinked. What? She gave a bitter laugh. Come on, Scott. Your mom used to accidentally call me by your ex's name. Your dad once told me Chloe's nose was, thankfully, from your side of the family. And Brian? He hit on me during your engagement party. I stared at her, stunned. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because you defended them, she said, not unkindly. You thought I was being sensitive. I didn't want to push you away from your family. I figured maybe things would change. I swallowed hard. They didn't. No, she said. They really didn't. We sat in silence, the weight of years pressing down on both of us. And then something strange happened. Lily reached across the counter and put her hand over mine. I'm sorry they made you feel small, she said. And I'm really sorry Chloe's growing up around that kind of energy. You deserve better. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the back of my hand. That night, after Chloe fell asleep on my shoulder during the drive home, I carried her inside and laid her gently on the couch. I sat beside her, brushing the hair from her forehead, and something inside me settled. I wasn't broken. I wasn't useless. I wasn't the failure they painted me to be. I was a father. I was enough. That week, I started rebuilding, not with big moves or grand gestures, just little things. I finally hung up the framed picture Chloe drew of the two of us holding hands under a rainbow. I called the venue again to confirm I still had control of the contract and got it in writing. I emailed each vendor and asked them to verify the final confirmation deadlines. One by one, I put the pieces in place. I also started doing something I hadn't done in years. I took time for myself. I dusted off my old keyboard and started composing again. Back before the tech job, before Chloe, before Lily, I used to play for hours. Not professionally, not even well. But it calmed me. I opened the windows, let the cold air roll in, and played until my fingers ached. And then I reached out to someone I'd ghosted. His name was Raj, an old friend from college. We used to be roommates, nerdy tech bros who lived off microwave ramen and stayed up too late building useless apps just for fun. He'd messaged me 3 months ago, asking if I wanted to consult on a project he was funding, a startup focused on educational tech for kids. I never replied. I was in the middle of unraveling. Now I texted him, still looking for help. He called within 5 minutes. Scott, man, I thought you were dead. Just emotionally. He laughed. You good? Getting there. I could really use your brain, he said. This thing's growing faster than we expected. If you're serious, we could talk partnership. Not just freelancing. I hesitated. I'd been at my current job for 8 years. Safe. Predictable. Soul-sucking. Let's talk, I said. Over the next few days, we met twice over Zoom. I reviewed their code base, made a few tweaks, pitched a simpler UI design for their dashboard. He loved it. By the end of the week, he offered me a stake. Modest now, but with a solid growth curve. I want you to run product dev, he said. Flexible hours. Remote. Family-first mindset. I looked at Chloe, curled up on the floor, drawing a stegosaurus in glitter crayon. I'm in. That night, I got an email from the venue. A reminder that final confirmations were due in 48 hours. If I wanted to cancel, I had to do it by then to avoid full charges. I hovered over the keyboard. Not yet. I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, one last time. Just to see if anyone would acknowledge what they'd done. Offer an apology. A text. A phone call. But none came. Instead, Brian posted a selfie in the group chat, standing in front of the venue's sign with Melissa. Look familiar? Someone replied. Don't trip on the leftover Scott cooties. Mom reacted with a heart emoji. I stared at my screen. Then I opened the vendor dashboard, scrolled to event status, and toggled everything from confirmed to canceled. Every single one. Venue. Canceled. Photographer. Canceled. Catering. Canceled. DJ. Canceled. Florist. Canceled. Even the champagne order. Gone. The confirmation emails came through one by one. I forwarded copies to my personal inbox, then sat back and let out a long breath. They were going to show up expecting lights and music and champagne toasts, and find nothing but silence. It wasn't spite. It wasn't rage. It was closure. And I wasn't done yet. Because the final piece? That was Chloe. She was the only one I owed anything to. So I planned a night for just the two of us. Board games. Pizza. A blanket fort in the living room. We even made mocktails with ginger ale and maraschino cherries. I printed out a big cardboard sign that said, Engagement party for dad and daughter. We laughed all night, while my family stood outside an empty banquet hall, wondering what happened. But you know what? I didn't care. Because the real party, the one that mattered, was happening right in my living room. And I wasn't missing a second of it. The silence that followed the canceled engagement dinner was louder than any apology I never got. It started around 5:07 p.m. That was the time Brian texted me from the venue parking lot. Dude, where's everyone? I was sitting on the floor with Chloe, helping her sort out mismatched Uno cards from a Go Fish deck. We were halfway through building a blanket fort that could rival the Taj Mahal. I didn't answer. At 5:22 p.m., another message. Scott, what the actual? The doors are locked. Then one from Melissa. The photographer isn't picking up. Neither is the caterer. Did you confirm anything? I turned off my phone. For the next 2 hours, I helped Chloe hang fairy lights along the edge of the couch cushions. We ate microwave popcorn from a mixing bowl. She told me a story about a dinosaur princess who drove a motorcycle. It was perfect. At 8:34 p.m., when I finally turned my phone back on, I had 23 messages, 12 missed calls, and 3 voicemails. All of them from my family. All of them furious. But none of them asked why. None of them said, "Are you okay?" or "We're sorry." Instead, they demanded explanations. Brian's first voicemail was all chest puff and expletives. Something about ruining the most important night of his life. And, "You've always been jealous of me." Classic. Mom's message. Disappointed sighs and phrases like, "I just don't understand how you could do this to your own brother." As if they hadn't been doing worse to me for years. Even Dad chimed in, warning me that actions have consequences. That one made me laugh. Because for once, they were right. And those consequences? They hadn't even begun yet. The next day, I got a knock on my door. Not a text. Not a call. A literal knock, old school. I peeked through the peephole and saw Brian standing there, hands in his coat pockets, jaw clenched. Chloe was in the other room, watching cartoons. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. We stood there on my porch in silence for a few seconds. "You canceled everything," he said. I didn't reply. "Melissa's parents flew in from Toronto," he added, as if I owed them something. Still nothing. "You think this is funny?" I looked him dead in the eye. "No, I think it's sad." He blinked. "Excuse me. You took everything I built, everything I paid for, and used it like it was your own. And you never asked. Never said thank you. You mocked me when my marriage ended. You laughed at me in the group chat like I was a joke. You used my wedding like it was some dollar store blueprint." "It's not that deep," he muttered. I tilted my head. "You showed up to my event in a clown suit and called it a parade. Then you're shocked when it rains." Brian shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether to keep posturing or back off. "Look, man, I get it. You're mad. But this was petty." "No," I said. "This was overdue." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Finally, he said the only honest thing I've ever heard come out of his mouth. "They're not going to forgive you for this." I nodded. "Good." He stared at me for a beat longer, then turned and walked back to his car. As the taillights disappeared, I realized something, that it felt good. Not in a vindictive way, just clean, like breathing after a long time underwater. But I wasn't done, because now that I had their attention, I wanted to do one better. I wanted them to understand exactly what they lost. So I started laying the groundwork, not for more sabotage, but for something better, something bigger. It started with the family group chat. I'd muted it months ago, but now I opened it for the first time in a while. The most recent messages were a war zone, everyone pointing fingers about the failed dinner. Some blamed Brian. Others blamed me. My Aunt Karen said something about embarrassing the family name. My cousin Jason offered to mediate, like he was auditioning for Dr. Phil. I scrolled up until I found the last thing I'd ever sent in that chat. A single thumbs-up reaction to one of Brian's jokes about my divorce. I typed a new message. "Glad to know you guys only notice me when I cancel your party. Shame none of you checked in when my life fell apart. Enjoy planning the next one. This time, use your own vendors. I'm out." Then I left the group. Blocked half of them. Unfollowed the rest on social media. Next, I made changes to my will. It sounds dramatic, but it wasn't out of spite. I just didn't want any of them having a claim to anything I built, financially or emotionally. I named Chloe as my sole beneficiary, of course. And I added a clause. If she was underage, Lily would manage the assets. It was a small but meaningful olive branch. She'd proven she could rise above pettiness, even when I couldn't. I also contacted the venue owner, the same one from our wedding, and asked for a favor. I need to book a private dinner, I said. Nothing huge. Just me and someone important. But I want it quiet. No guests. No noise. Just good food, some candles, and one table. She laughed softly. After the last fiasco, I was hoping you'd still call. When? Next Friday. That Friday, I picked Chloe up from school. She had glitter glue on her backpack and dirt on her knees. You and me, I told her, are going on a fancy date. She grinned. Like with spaghetti and candles? Exactly like that. We dressed up. She wore her favorite sparkly blue dress. I put on an actual tie. We sat in the middle of an otherwise empty banquet hall, twinkling lights strung up just for us, and shared spaghetti and meatballs like we were in a Disney movie. I even hired the same photographer. Yes, the one Brian tried to use. He took portraits of me and Chloe laughing, playing rock, paper, scissors, sharing dessert. I had one framed. Put it on my mantle. Labeled it, Real Family. But that night did more than just make a memory. It made a statement. Because when I posted one of those photos online, just one, captioned with best date I've ever had, I watched the ripple effect spread. Brian saw it. So did Melissa. And more importantly, so did my mom. She texted me 2 days later. That was unnecessary. I replied, you don't get to decide what's necessary in my life anymore. She didn't respond. But that was okay. Because now I had something better than their approval. I had peace. And just when I thought I was done setting the stage, an unexpected message popped up from a woman named Rachel, my cousin's ex-wife. Hey Scott, I heard what happened with the dinner. Just wanted to say, good for you. I always admired how quiet you were. Turns out you were just waiting for the right moment to speak. We ended up talking for over an hour. She told me stories I'd never heard, about how my parents talked behind my back, about things they said at my wedding, about why she left my cousin. It wasn't surprising, but it was fuel, because suddenly, I wasn't the only one who'd been mistreated. There were cracks all along the family's golden image. And now, I wasn't afraid to expose them. I started reaching out, quietly, carefully, to a few more people who distanced themselves from the family over the years. A cousin who was cut off after coming out. An uncle who lost his job and was shamed for needing help. An aunt who'd been excommunicated after marrying someone too different. They all had stories. They all had pain. And none of them were surprised by mine. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't the villain in this story. I was the first domino. And with the right push, I could make the whole tower fall. But not with fire. With light. With truth. And that truth, it was going to come out at the most inconvenient time possible. Because there was another event coming up soon. Bigger than the engagement dinner. More public. Harder to cancel. My brother's wedding. And I already knew exactly what I was going to do. The wedding was set for late September, an outdoor ceremony at a vineyard just outside the city. Classic Brian. Overly grand, predictably flashy, and meticulously copied from someone else's idea of elegance. According to the invite, yes, they still had the nerve to send me one. The theme was modern rustic with a vintage twist. I didn't know what that meant, but I was pretty sure it translated to mason jars, fake wooden signs, and a seating chart printed in calligraphy font. I wasn't planning on going, at least not at first. But then I found out who was invited. Chloe. Without asking me. They'd sent her an invitation addressed to Miss Chloe Kessler, complete with RSVP card, child's meal option, and even a little flower crown in the box. Melissa had included a handwritten note. We'd love for Chloe to be our flower girl. She'd look adorable. Let us know if she can do the rehearsal. XOM. No text. No call. No attempt to coordinate with her actual parents. I was livid. And then, strangely, I wasn't. Because suddenly, it all clicked into place. This wasn't just about recycled vendors or a hijacked wedding anymore. This was about control. Image. The family's obsession with appearances. Brian and Melissa wanted the picture-perfect wedding. They wanted the crowd. The aesthetic. The PR. And Chloe? She was a prop. And I knew exactly how to make that house of cards collapse. Not with destruction, but with truth. First, I RSVP'd yes for Chloe, with a note that said, I'll be accompanying her as her guardian. Then I called Lily. I have a plan, I told her. But I need your blessing. She listened. She asked questions. She paused for a long time before finally saying, if it helps Chloe understand boundaries, do it. Just don't drag her into anything messy. I won't, I promised. She'll just be there to hold my hand. The venue was a sprawling estate with rolling hills, ivy-covered stone walls, and those wrought iron garden chairs that look expensive but feel like torture devices. I arrived early with Chloe, both of us dressed in matching navy and gray. She looked like royalty. I looked like the bodyguard. Melissa greeted us at the front like she was the owner of the estate. She bent down and did that high-pitched voice adults use when they talk at kids. "There's my little flower queen. Are you excited?" Chloe nodded politely, but stayed glued to my side. Then Melissa stood and looked me over. "You clean up well," she said, smiling with her teeth, but not her eyes. I smiled right back. Funny, I was about to say the opposite. She blinked. "Excuse me. I meant your dress," I said, nodding toward the back seam. "Looks like it's struggling." She turned red and stormed off. Brian didn't even say hello when he saw me. Just muttered, "Can't believe you showed up," and walked toward the groomsmen. I took Chloe's hand, and we walked the perimeter of the venue, taking it all in. Then I made my move. During the rehearsal dinner a week prior, which I had not been invited to, I had quietly contacted the Vineyard's event coordinator. Turned out, they were the same company that almost hosted the engagement party, the one I had canceled. The manager remembered me. "Oh, you're that guy," she said over the phone. "The one who ghosted the Golden Boy wedding. That was legendary." I laughed. "Guilty. I have a proposal." And I told her, not a wild sabotage or petty prank. Something quieter. A reshuffling of the day's schedule. A few technical hiccups. A minor microphone failure. A carefully timed delay with the reception seating chart. In exchange, a generous donation to the Vineyard's sustainability program. She agreed. But the best part? I didn't need to sabotage anything. Because sometimes, the truth does the heavy lifting. The ceremony started 45 minutes late. The guests were sweating in the sun. A few elderly relatives left before the vows even started. The flower arrangements were missing from half the rows. They had been left in the delivery van because someone mixed up the offloading times. Melissa nearly tripped walking down the aisle when her heel got stuck in the brickwork. No one helped her. And then came the moment. The officiant began the speech. Brian stood smug, Melissa glowing with practiced grace. And I stood from my seat and cleared my throat. Loudly. All heads turned. Brian's face twitched. "I just want to say something," I said, projecting my voice. The officiant froze. "I'm Scott," I said, "brother of the groom. Some of you know me. Most of you don't. But I want to tell you a quick story." Brian started toward me. "Sit down." But I held up a hand. "This won't take long." There was something about the way I said it. Calm, measured, almost gentle, that made everyone pause. In January, my marriage ended. It was hard, quiet, painful, the kind of pain that you carry in your chest like a brick. When it happened, no one from this family called to check on me. No one asked about my daughter. Instead, they mocked me. In a group chat, my brother made jokes. My parents laughed. And when I said nothing, they took that as permission to keep going. Gasps rippled through the crowd. But I didn't come here today to make a scene. I came here because my daughter was invited to be a flower girl. And I wanted her to see that sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you what not to become. I looked directly at Brian. "You taught me a lot, little brother. But not in the way you think. You taught me how to be spineless. How to deflect. How to coast through life taking and never giving. And I want you to know, I'm done." I turned to Chloe, extended my hand. "Let's go, sweetheart." She nodded, took my hand without hesitation, and we walked down the aisle, opposite the bride, past rows of stunned guests, through the double doors, and out into the open sunlight. I didn't look back. The fallout came fast. I found out later that 3 guests left immediately after we did. 2 of Melissa's aunts got into an argument with Brian's friends during the reception about family loyalty and had to be escorted out. The microphone failed during the speeches. The seating chart got lost. The dinner came out late and cold. The wedding video ended up being unusable because one of the second shooters accidentally deleted half the ceremony footage. My phone blew up that night. Calls, texts, voicemails. I answered none of them. I let the silence speak. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my apartment. She didn't knock. She buzzed repeatedly until I came down. When I opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept. "You humiliated us," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "You did that all on your own. You've always been dramatic. And you've always been blind," I said. "To what Brian is. To what you are. I'm done performing for your approval. I'm not your puppet. I'm not your scapegoat. I'm a father. And I'm building a life for Chloe that doesn't include your twisted version of love. She blinked, stunned. You'd cut out your own family? I smiled. I'm not cutting anyone out. I'm just finally recognizing who was never in. She left without another word. That was the last time I saw her. 6 months later, I bought a small cabin in the mountains. Nothing fancy, just peace. Chloe and I go there on weekends. We paint rocks and build forts out of sticks. I bring my keyboard, and sometimes I let her pound on the keys while I play. I still talk to Lily. We co-parent well, better than we ever were as spouses. She's dating someone now. I'm happy for her. Raj's startup took off. I'm now head of product design. We work remotely, which means I get to walk Chloe to school most mornings. The old family group chat? I haven't missed it once. Brian and Melissa are still together. I hear things through the grapevine, mostly from Rachel, who I now talk to regularly. Apparently, Melissa's parents are less than thrilled about how the wedding turned out. Rumor has it, they're blaming Brian. Poetic. But I don't care. Not really. Because the real revenge was never about payback. It was about taking my life back. And I did. Completely.